Welcome, welcome, welcome. Today we are going to talk about delivering speech. If you're interested to join this discussion, please keep on watching. So, in our previous meeting last week, we have talked about using visuals for our public speaking activities. Now we are going to talk about something that is, of course, related to that. It's about delivering speech. So I created more than 20 slides. This is what we're going to talk about today, which is delivering speech. So we know when we are listening to people talking, we're going to be able to understand the subject matter from the words that those people say, and it's going to be 7%. So it's very, very little. So actually, the words choice are not going to play a very significant contribution to the talk. We are going to understand the subject matter in a much better percentage from tone of voice, which is going to be 38%. And this is surprising. We are going to be able to understand a lot of things from people's body language. It's 55%. Wow, this is pretty surprising, right? So, according to the method of delivery, we know that speech are going to be divided those based on the manuscripts, speech from the memory, impromptu speech, and extemporaneous speech. I swear, this is the first time for me to know this word. That's why I'm trying to learn how to pronounce this word correctly. Extemporaneous. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Alrighty. So the first one, manuscript speech. So usually it is going to be written out fully. So everything's going to be based on what is written in a piece of paper, and then it is usually read to the audience. So one of the examples of this type of speech is going to be the one that is done by a valedictorian in a graduation ceremony. So as you see in this picture here, and then impromptu speech. So I'm pretty sure that you have this experience a lot of time, especially in classes, right? So when your lecturer asks you to suddenly answer a question, right? You are not going to be prepared for any notes or any manuscripts or anything like that. So what you can do is by saying whatever is on your mind. So to produce impromptu speech successfully, you need to have some kind of organization in your speech. So, for example, by saying something like, first, I would like to talk about, and then I would like to share with you about this, and finally, so organize your speech in that manner in order to be able to present the message clearly. Considering that this type of speech is not going to have enough preparation, so it's going to be delivered with little or no immediate preparation. So, for example, if somebody is suddenly interviewed by a reporter and this person is not prepared with the answer, then he or she is going to have an impromptu speech. And the next one is extemporaneous speech. In nature, it is going to be almost the same as the impromptu speech, but this time the speaker is going to have some kind of notes. So the speech is going to be based on notes. So it's going to be carefully prepared and rehearsed, and sometimes it is presented from brief notes. So, for example, a yoga trainer, in order to be able to present the yoga movement and also the explanation on that particular move or for example about the breathing strategy, something like that. I don't do yoga, so I know nothing about yoga. So she is going to develop her speech from some kind of notes. And when we think about speech delivery based on the use of voice and our gesture or body movement, then we know that there are nonverbal communication and verbal communication, right? You know that verbal communication is performed when the speaker use words, and nonverbal communication is when words are absent but the speaker use body language or gesture or body movement or facial expressions or eye contacts, right? So when we think about the conversational quality, we need to think about that speech needs to be natural or delivered as spontaneous as possible no matter how many times it is practiced. So we need to be able to produce a speech which is effortless. So with that being said, a good speech delivery is going to be the one that has a conversational quality. That is natural, that is spontaneous. So people know that this particular person delivers speech. So another conversational quality that we need to have to present our speech is being able to differentiate between speaking formally and speaking casually. So the characteristics, for example, like the way the speaker presents herself or himself, the body language, the words that they use, the topic that they have, and then the relation between the speaker and the audience. So, what are the dangers of being too formal? Well, one of them is going to be your relation with the audience. When it is too formal, your audience are going to be distant from you. They're not going to feel that they have relation with you, and probably they're not going to be able to feel comfortable, and so they're not going to be able to learn much. So in the same manner, we also need to think about how can a speech be too casual. So we need to pay attention to the way we present ourselves in front of the audience, from the words that we say, the gesture, nonverbal communication that we have, and the way we treat the audience. So, in order to make sure that we are going to be able to present a good speech, we need to avoid our speech for being too casual from the words that we use. We need to keep them formal but still understandable by the audience, and our appearance as well. So, avoid sloppy appearance. So, dress appropriately according to the occasion, not too much but also not underdressed, and avoid using my battery is low, and avoid using slang. Try to use words and terms that are professional, and in terms of body language, nonverbal communication, gesture, avoid something that is going to disrupt the flow of the speech. For example, by placing your hands in your pockets, or fold arms, because it shows that you are being unfriendly or cold, right? There are a lot of gestures that we need to learn related to how to present a good speech. Related to the speaker's voice, there are a lot of things that we need to pay attention to. So, for example, related to the volume, vocal variety, pitch, rate, pause, and articulation. We are going to talk about this one by one in a minute. So, what is meant by pause is the momentarily break in our vocal delivery. Should be delivery. Why it is deli? It should be vocal delivery. Sorry. This is not a very good example, guys. You need to proofread and revise, right? Before presenting the visual to the audience. But Bad example. Okay, so pauses momentarily break in your vocal delivery. So make sure you also use some kind of pause when you talk. So avoid speaking like a robot, for example. But sometimes you will not be able to avoid using pauses. So make sure that you don't pause for more than 3 seconds when you have speech, right? You still remember that, right? Our discussion on speaking without hesitation, right? Okay. And then the volume, it's about the loudness and softness of your voice. So make sure that you organize your volume in such a way that it is not going to be boring. Make sure that people in front and people in the back are going to be able to hear your voice clearly, and then pitch related to your highness and lowness of voice. Make sure that you don't shout, right? Or scream when you speak, and then rate related to speed at which somebody speaks. So make sure that you speak in such a way that it is going to be understood by the audience, but also not to make them fall asleep. Now it's more complicated. Related to the focal variety, it is related to changes in rate, pitch, and volume or expressiveness. Sometimes, for example, when you talk about something, some parts of your speech that need to be highlighted, then you are going to need to articulate this word or to mention this word slowly in order to make it more understandable to the audience. And then pronunciation, it is the accepted standard sound or rhythm in a language. So now we are dealing with how to say something correctly, especially if your speech is delivered in another language. You need to really pay attention to this one, because sometimes pronunciation can influence the way people understand what you talk about. So, also related to that is dialect. I would say if you speak English, for example, you know that English is spoken in a lot of different dialects. So, if you think about the US, for example, people in the Western area, they speak differently: North Central, Northern, Midland, Southern, New York, Northern New England, Appalachian. So maybe you also hear the word accent, right? Accent in this case is closer to pronunciation, so it is related to how people actually pronounce a word. But dialect in this case also related to different vocabulary, different terms, different language, I would say, that people use. So, for example, if you think about also in Indonesia, about Japanese language, people from Central Java are going to speak differently from those who live in East Java, for example. All of them speak Japanese, but different dialects, and they use different vocabulary as well. And then articulation, it is related to the clearness of the words and sounds that we use in language. Now, this case is often happened in speaking, especially for me personally. I use this quite a lot, and it is almost unavoidable. It's quite hard for us to avoid this vocalized pause. In order to trim the habit of using the vocalized pause, uh, er, uh, and so on. Um, See, I just I just use that. So in order to avoid using vocalized pauses, we can do just pause. Okay, as long as it is less than 3 seconds, then you're good. You're on the right track. And be conscious of it. So every time you're about to use the vocalized pause, you're about to use okay, uh, be alert, be aware of it, be conscious of it. Okay. So now we are going to move along to talking about the speaker's body language. So it is the non-verbal type of communication. So starting from the personal appearance. So if it is going to be a formal speech, you need to make sure that you also dress properly, appropriate for the occasion. I would say that most of these people over here are speaking formally, right? Except for maybe the gentleman right here with plain white t-shirt and jeans, and also probably this one. This one I would say it's also formal. Looks like this gentleman right here works in a factory or something like that. And then movement. So make sure you are not moving from one part of the stage and another part of the stage. And then gesture. Always remember to use appropriate gesture on the stage when you speak. So, for example, avoid this type of gesture right here and this one right here. So, folded arms will show that you are cold, you're not friendly, and this one, hands in pockets, will show that you are being too informal. Related to the eye contact, make sure that you distribute your eye contact to the entire audience. Now, when you are sure that you have prepared your speech nicely, and now time to practice. So, in practicing your speech delivery, you need to make sure that you practice speech loudly. You can record your voice and then listen to it over and over again and find out whether you have fulfilled all the requirements, right? And refine the delivery. Imagine about when you write, you are producing your final draft for your speech. Okay. And then do a dress rehearsal. It's not about trying any dress, but do a real practice as if you are in front of the audience. Now we know that in formal speech, usually we're going to have a question and answer session in the end of the our public speaking activity. So, how to handle the Q&A section like a champ? The first one is you need to approach questions with a positive, always positive attitude. Even though, some people are going to ask you, irritating question, annoying question, but always make sure that you handle the questions positively. Avoid being sarcastic, argumentative, or being super defensive, or answering the questions harshly, because it's going to show that you are not a professional speaker. And you need to listen carefully to the person asking question. Make sure at least you restate the question once, first, to make sure that you address the question correctly. The second one is to buy some time, okay, between listening to the question and while finding ideas, to answer this question. Next, direct answers to the entire audience. So you're not only directing the answer to the person that asks you question, but also to the entire people in the room, to make sure that you distribute your attention fairly to those people. And then answer the question honestly. You need to avoid being apologetic. So if you are not able to answer this question for some reasons, you can express your positive attitude by noting that particular question and that you are going to plan to answer the question in some other time. For example, asking this particular person to send you an email, and then you are going to address the question later in an email communication. And then stay on track in terms of time and topic. So sometimes in a public speaking activity, you are going to have a moderator to help you organize the session, right? but sometimes there is no moderator. So you need to make sure how many minutes are going to be allocated for the Q&A session, for example, and make sure that you are not going to be drifted by answering the questions outside of the topic. What about the online Q&A session? Well, sometimes you can make use of the, what is it, the chat box to check the question, what type of questions. Or sometimes you can address the question online as well by typing the answer in the chat box or answering the question directly. I think there will be no difference in terms of strategy to answer questions. Now related to that about presenting online, especially in this current situation during the global pandemic, that everything is delivered online. From the special nature of the online environment, online communication, you are not going to know exactly what your audience, what the people over there are doing, right? So compared to when you are in the same room with those people, you are going to engage with those people. You know what those people are doing. While listening to your speech, you are going to be able to communicate directly with those people. But in the online environment, you don't even know if your audience multitask, you know opening their social media, updating their status on Facebook, or posting pictures on Instagram. You don't even know, right? So in this case, you also need to pay attention to yourself. Avoid being tempted to multitask during the online events, especially when you are sharing your screen. You can accidentally share those activities online, which is going to be embarrassing, right? And also related to the technology preparation, there are a lot of platforms that we can use for the online events, like, for example, Zoom or Google Meet or WebEx or Cisco or some other platforms, right? So we need to make sure that we are familiar with those type of technology. If we're not sure on how those platforms work, we need to make sure that the IT assistance is going to be around. So, just in case. And then we need to control our visual environment. So, this reminds me of a story from somebody who had a job interview. So, this gentleman is very smart, I would say, and knowledgeable. He was able to tackle all the difficult questions like a champion. Basically, that interview used a Zoom platform. So you know that in Zoom you can modify your background, right? Like, for example, the one that I am using currently. So it is an artificial filter or something provided by Zoom that I love, so that if we have clutter behind us or around us, then it is not going to be visible. So at that time, or maybe because it was required that that particular candidate or that interview event, people were not allowed to use filter. So accidentally behind that candidate, there were like piles and piles and piles of laundry, unfolded laundry, and something else that looked really bad visible on the screen. So sadly, that particular candidate did not make it. So what is visible around you is also very important. Okay, make sure that it is clutter free. You need to do some kind of like a Mary Kondo type of activity before the speech. Okay, so now the nonverbal communication, because it is online, and if it is in Zoom like that, then sometimes your movements are going to be weird, right? Like blocked or something like that. It's not going to be as normal as when you are when you are actually naturally on stage, right? So avoid using excessive gesture. Make sure that you are facing the camera. So if you see this picture right here, like the lady right here, because it is like you're too close to the camera, so it looks like a selfie. And this one is like too far away from the camera, so it is not effective as well. And the best thing is around 30 inches from the camera, so it will produce the best picture on the screen. And also avoid doing something that is unnecessary in front of the camera. Like, for example, accidentally, picking your nose or doing something else that is silly, that looks silly. And finally, make sure that the camera is not too high or too low. Okay? So it's going to be able to present yourself nicely online in front of the camera. Alrighty. The next one is controlled speed. So speak in a natural speed to avoid excessive pauses and also to avoid multitasking, because sometimes if you're speaking too slow, then you're going to be tempted, to open something else if you're speaking online, right? um, and also be always ready to the backup plans, because it is online. You need to be ready if suddenly there is a blackout and there is no internet, or there is something wrong with the technology, with the laptop that you use, or things like that. You need to be ready for that. And of course, just like the normal speech on the stage, you need to practice. You need to give it a dress rehearsal to make sure that your speech is going to be polished, that you are going to be able to present your best speech in front of the audience. Well, that's the end of our discussion today on speech delivery. For this time, I'm not going to give you any task because we are going to have another activity in class. First, we are going to have another discussion on speech delivery based on purpose. And then the second one, which is also related to the activity that we are going to do for the second half of the semester and for our community service activity, which is group distribution. So I'm going to see you in class. Stay safe, take care of yourself and people around you. Bye, guys.